Welcome to Cooking from the Cave. I'm Chef Pete Truziak, and today we're going to be making barbecue pork. This process does take a little bit of time, but it is a perfect recipe to either feed for family, guests, a big party, or even for that big game that's coming up soon. What we're going to start off with is a pork butt. This pork butt is boned in, so there's going to be a bone going through. You can get it at almost any butcher, and this one is about a 5-pound roast here. So what we have to do is we have to do something to this meat to give it some flavor. Right now, it's not going to taste like much. So we're going to put a dry rub on it. And a dry rub can consist of anything that you really want to put on that. They use the word dry rub because primarily we're going to be using dried spices. But I've seen some where there's a little Worcestershire sauce on there and stuff like that, or even a balsamic vinegar. That's fine. It's still considered a dry rub. The key is, though, the dry rub does two things. One, gives it a lot of flavor, and two, makes it very tender. We're going to start off with some smoked paprika. And I'll give you exact recipe amounts on the website, so don't worry about that. Just kind of watch what happens with this. We have some ancho peppers as well as turmeric, coriander, and I'm using coriander in this because I want to give it that nice citrus flavor to it. You could use orange zest as well. Some red pepper flakes. I have dried thyme as well as bay leaves, and there's 3 bay leaves in here. Salt, granulated sugar, and pepper. And all we're going to do now is we're going to coat this with all of those dried spices. And make sure you coat it real well so that all that pork gets covered and all that flavoring that goes in here really will enhance that pork. Look at how nice that pork looks, almost good enough to eat right now. The next step with a dry rub is we need to let it sit with that dry rub on it so that all the moisture that's inside and all those seasonings react with each other, pushing seasonings into the meat and pulling the moisture out and mixing up the two things. This will make it tender and flavorful. So the next step is to get yourself some plastic wrap, and we're going to wrap this up in the plastic wrap and then put it in the refrigerator. You can do it for a minimum of 3 hours, but I prefer to do it for about 12, so I'll do it overnight. So that's our next step. Alright, it's been now about 8 hours sitting in the roast has been sitting in the refrigerator, and I'm going to pull it out. And the next step is I've laid out a roasting pan on my countertop, put aluminum foil on it. I have the oven set now at 250. I'm going to go ahead and cook this roast in the oven for roughly about 4 to 6 hours. And we're just going to check it at about the 4-hour mark, see how it's doing, and we'll probably just continue to check it after that every 30 minutes to get to the point of the pork actually just like falling apart. And we'll just use a regular fork to see how that works and just kind of shred it as we're cooking. I'm going to pull off all this plastic wrap, and you'll notice that pork's changed color obviously from all the seasonings and everything, but also it's starting to absorb all the seasonings and it's excreting a lot of the water inside, so it's going to be a little wetter than what you started with. That's totally natural. At this point, what we want to do is we want to pull the plastic off. You can throw that away now. We're going to put the pork right on the aluminum foil, cover it up. Hopefully I got enough aluminum foil for this. Fold it over. And when doing this, make sure it's easy for you to get access to it. So I'm going to fold over the sides. I'm going to make 2 small flaps so that when I do want to check it at about the 4-hour mark, I can easily lift it off, see what's going on in there, and then seal it back up. I'm not really wasting a lot of time in the oven. And also it's going to be hot, so the easier you make it now, the easier it's going to be later on. At this point, we're going to put it in the oven. The oven's set at 250 on straight bake mode. And I'll just set a timer for 4 hours. Come back and check that. While that's going on, and this is a perfect time to make your barbecue sauce, we're going to heat up our pan on low heat. And we'll probably wind up pureeing this or putting it in a blender when it's all said and done. So Follow me with the next couple steps. It's quite easy. Put a little oil in the pan. Add 1 whole head of garlic. I didn't chop up the garlic or anything like that. It's roughly about 10 to 12 cloves of garlic. That'll go in there. 2 shallots. Again, I just peeled it, threw it in there. We're going to do tomato paste. One can of diced tomatoes. And what's going to happen is everything's going to slowly stew down. I have 1 tablespoon of hot sauce. We're going to do 6 ounces of coffee. This is espresso. I'm making a coffee-based barbecue sauce. 2 tablespoons of whole grain mustard. And some people will put beer in there instead of the coffee. You might want to put soda in there instead of the coffee. Coffee's going to give it that nice, rich flavor, as the Coke does, or the beer does. It's also going to give it some body. And then we're going to do 1 cup of brown sugar. Stir that up to make it nice and sweet. You could use honey if you wanted to, or molasses. We're just going to stir this up. Right now we have a pot of just ingredients. Nothing's happened yet. It is by no means barbecue sauce. The slow cooking of this over low heat will turn it into barbecue sauce. It gets really thick and really sweet. We're going to add 1 cup of chicken stock. Now that all of our ingredients are in the pot, we're going to bring it up to a boil. Once it comes up to a boil, we're going to want to bring it immediately back down to a simmer, and over really low heat, we're going to let it cook for 4 to 6 hours. Again, the same amount of time that we have our pork in the oven. So this is real simple. Once that pork goes in, make your sauce. Just keep an eye on it. And again, with that spatula, just continue to stir it while it's slowly simmering. You'll take the lid off, you'll do a stir, you'll make sure all those solids get pushed down. And after the 4 to 6 hours, you're going to have great barbecue sauce. You probably have to puree it up. We're going to have excellent pulled pork. Our next step after the process of cooking the sauce and the pulled pork, we need to puree this sauce up. And it's been reduced now, it's been cooking now for about 6 hours. And it's reduced by half. So we start off with quite a bit of liquid in here. Now it's nice and thick. We're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and put it in our blender and puree this up so we get a nice smooth sauce. Remember, when doing this, you're going to have a hot liquid in the blender. If you don't have a blender for this, a hand blender might work. I should say will work fine. Any stand-up blender will work. If you even don't have either of those 2 objects, then just kind of use your spatula and mash everything around together. Or even a potato masher would work fairly well for this. Now, this is going to be a hot liquid, so what we want to do is make sure that either cover the top with a towel so that the steam doesn't explode on us and we burn ourselves, or do something to just make sure that we're careful, because once this heats up, or as it's heated up and we puree it up, it's going to create a lot of steam. It's going to kind of make that top burp or a bubble up on us. So I'm going to start on low speed and process it accordingly. And what will happen with this is it'll thicken up on you because of all the ingredients that were separate are now coming together. It'll become a real tight barbecue sauce for you. I'll let it run for about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to slowly drizzle in about 2 tablespoons of oil, and that'll also help give it a little rich flavor in it, and also that fat from that olive oil will give it more flavor as well. Alright, that looks great. If you do want a thicker sauce, by all means cook this longer. they'll definitely tighten up on you. We're going to go ahead and pour this sauce, not all of it, probably about 2/3 of it, into our bowl here. And we're going to use this bowl as kind of our quote-unquote working bowl, because once I pull the pork out, we're going to need to take that pork, put it into something, and then be able to shred or pull that pork apart. And that's what I'm going to use that bowl for. So it's been full 6 hours on really low heat. The pork is actually starting to fall apart itself. You can see it's pulling away. There's a lot of liquid left in the actual aluminum foil. At this point, I mean, the pork is falling apart. We're going to just carefully, it's going to be hot, you're going to just want to move it into your sauce over here, your barbecue sauce, and we'll kind of shred it apart. Remember, I did talk about this being a boned-in pork loin, so I'm going to kind of work around where the bones are. Let's see, it's going to fall apart. Alright, so we're going to keep working as much of the meat off the bones, and some of these are neck bones, some of them are blades, shoulder blades, which is what this is. We're just going to take these and put them into our work bowl over there. Remember, that's the bowl with our barbecue sauce. You know, if you got to get in there with your fingers to make sure you don't leave any bones in there, go right ahead. At this point, I am just going to keep stirring the pork around until I think it's well covered. And you know, of course, taste this as you're doing this, because, all right, we started with maybe a couple cups of sauce in there and some liquid and seasonings. You don't know, maybe you need a little bit more sauce, maybe you need to add a little bit more of the juice that has been cooked off of the pork to give it more flavor. I've been tasting it along the way. I also would recommend that if you're going to go low and slow like I did with 250 as your heat, you know, you could extend this 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours of cooking, and it would still just continually break down. So the timing of this is more of how much time do you have on your side, and the longer you can let it go in the oven, the better. The more flavor, the more seasoning is going to get into the meat, the more it's going to break down and give you this really wonderful tender cut of pork. If you don't have the time, as a little note, I would increase my heat to 325 when you originally put that pork in there, and you can get it done in about 3 to 4 hours. Okay, so if you need to have that, use that little tip if necessary. All right, I think it looks a little dry. I haven't even tried it yet, but it looks dry to me. I have a couple options here. I have this great barbecue sauce, which I'm going to go with, or I can add more of the liquid that the pork was actually cooking in. I think I want to add more of the sauce, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I still look at this pork and I'm saying, all right, it's still a little white to me. I need more of that red. I need more of that barbecue color to it, so I can feel satisfied when I serve this up to my family and friends. Alright, that looks good. I'm just going to dig in, give it a try. Tastes great, but I'm going to add more sauce. And I'm not going to add a lot of salt or pepper to it at this point, because a lot of that flavoring is in that sauce. I want to see what that sauce does to it before I go any further with the salt or pepper. Alright, so we're ready. Now the next thing is picking the perfect roll for your barbecue sauce. I'm going to go with a butter roll or a sweet roll. Obviously you could make a very large one. You could go with Italian roll, something to that effect. But make sure your guests get all that hard work that you put into it. With that nice, sweet, buttery roll that's going to go perfect with it. And I'm going to plate a few of these up for my family, and then we're going to dig in. So thanks for watching Cooking from the Cave. I'm Chef Pete Trusiak, and I'll see you really soon.